in-house service design, is it a dream job or a daily battle? We're diving into the truth in this special series. Forget the theory, we're talking to professionals who are in the trenches working hard to make services better, learning from their real-world insights and hard-won lessons. Hey there, and welcome back to the Service Design Show. If you are a regular listener of the show, you know that we invite the brightest experts, pioneers, and thought leaders to share their wisdom with us. And that's not changing anytime soon. But I also want to spotlight the professionals who roll up their sleeves and do the crucial on-ground work of improving the services around us. These professionals bring a wealth of practical wisdom, knowing the difference between theory and real-world application. Because let's face it, you can only learn so much from books and courses. The deepest learning happens on the job, in the thick of it. So this conversation is part of a new monthly deep dive into the world of in-house service design with two guests who live and breathe it daily. These guests are experienced professionals and members of my Circle community, where they recently hosted a session. If you are not familiar with the Circle is a community for in-house service design leaders and those who aspire to be. I started the community a few years ago because in-house service design can be isolating. It's hard to find peers who challenge and support you while you are battling the status quo inside your organization. So with the Circle, it's like having your own team of service design superheroes without the payroll expense. If you're curious about the Circle and want to learn more, head over to servicedesignshow.com/circle. You'll also be able to find the link in the show notes of this episode. Now, in this first episode of this series, we get to speak to Shelby Bauer and Nicole. You'll hear about their personal service design journeys, get key insights from the Circle session that they hosted, and we'll bust some in-house myths. So if you are ready for some juicy behind-the-scenes stories and those messy details you rarely hear, buckle up and let's jump right in. My name is Mark Fontijn and you are listening to the Service Design Show. Welcome to the show, Shelby and Nicole.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm excited for this reboot of the podcast series where we are highlighting and spotlighting the people who do the hard work of service design, making the services we use day in, day out a little bit better. Thank you for being the guinea pigs on this reboot of the session. I've got so many questions for you that I'd like to get your thoughts and ideas on. We, as the Service Design Show audience, want to know everything and anything from you. Usually we do a one-on-one conversation. This is like 1 versus 2, so we'll have to see how we juggle the microphone. I'll do my best to get some order in the chaos. This episode has 3 quote-unquote chapters. We'll start with a little bit of context about you and your journey into service design. Obviously, we'll talk about your session inside the Circle at the dinner table where you brought food for thought. And we'll close off with some myth busting about in-house service design. So that's what's on the menu today. To kick things off, let's do some quick introductions. Let me start with you, Shelby. I'm really curious. Could you share a little bit about who you are and what you do without breaking any non-disclosure agreements that might get you fired?
Sure. Hi, I'm Shelby Bauer. I currently work inside a hospital system in Greater Chicago area. Rush Health Systems is the name of it. I've been doing service design work for about 13 or 14 years since I discovered service design, essentially. And I started to sort of low-key do it in my UX jobs. I discovered it looking at practical service design, a website that was put together by Morgan Miller and Erica Flowers. And I was like, oh, this is everything I have been asking about, but don't have any way to answer. This is amazing. So it started out with the blueprints and And honestly, I didn't find a lot of success using methods that people were not already familiar with in delivering UX work. So I kind of just sort of did it undercover, really, so that I could have better answers to questions and get better answers to my questions. So that's where I started. And since then, I've been practicing it without necessarily calling it that, because it's very confusing to people when you start talking about the various flavors and colors of design. So I just don't say what it is. And today, I use those skills in a couple of different ways in my current role. I am the first UX person in the whole 15,000 person health system. And I work on the digital transformation team, which doesn't actually have a home almost anywhere. We report into the chief medical officer. So we don't work in IT, we don't work in the clinical space, we don't do the operational stuff. We go across all of those things. And what I work on is bringing and improving virtual care to people. It's a thing that was sort of cobbled together at the beginning of COVID, where like people couldn't leave home and they had COVID and they had to stay at home, and all of a sudden everybody was having virtual conversations, including physicians. And they kind of bypassed a ruling where you got paid as much for a virtual care like appointment as you did for an in-person care appointment, which was actually the linchpin of making sure it happened more. The problem is it was all cobbled together and it's a terrible user experience for lots of reasons and in many ways. So I work on services that improve that, including access to it. And in healthcare, when we say access, we mean the ability to schedule an appointment and get access to healthcare. Like those two things kind of go together. The other way I use it is that because we're this tiny little team that sits in this weird place in the organization, you have to spend a lot of time thinking about how you're going to build relationships in these places and spaces that that I'm not super familiar with. I'm no doctor, but I talk to doctors all the time. So I have to really think about how I talk about what I do, how I get answers to the questions I have for them, and how I build those relationships in almost like a customer service way. So, that both of those things require service design skills, to me, from my perspective, because you're kind of like building an architecture for how you're going to deliver and delivering at the same time. So that's me in a nutshell.
That's you in a nutshell. Interesting. Undercover service designer. That might also be an interesting title for a series that we should do one day.
Yeah.
Nicole, I think you're also in the healthcare space. This is by coincidence. I didn't plan it like that, but could you give us a little bit more context about who you are and what you do these days?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely some synergies, Shelby. And I love the undercoverness and sort of the like working in between spaces, because I find myself doing that a lot. So my name is Nicole Bennett. I also go by Cole. And right now I am a lead service designer at Laerdal, which is a health tech company. It's a medical simulation and training company. And I'll take us back to 2012 when I was doing my public health degree, and I was trying to figure out what my thesis was. And I was like, okay, what is this? I'm trying to improve service in a hospital, at a teen clinic. And I think I've heard about the term evaluation, and it's not really a process evaluation, but that's sort of what everyone's telling me it is. And I was really trying to improve services at a teen clinic. And I had no idea about the design field at the time, but that's really what this project was back when I was studying public health. And then when I entered the federal government, there was a lot of momentum on design and design thinking and HCD and innovation. And so when I was doing sort of public health work inside the government, there was this opportunity to really learn more about this practice. I was like, wait, what? This is what my thesis was. This is what I've been doing all along. And I think that's so common for a lot of people, like stumbling into the design field. And so I added that practice to my public health practice, and really leaned in hard, and I had our whole federal office working on working through the design thinking processes and getting buy-in from people that might not have otherwise been excited about sticky notes at the time, and realized that this helps this helps like democratize decision making, and really helps move projects forward in a collaborative, co-creative way. And so I was able to really add design. I learned it through the Luma Institute, which was wonderful, and through some sprints with IDEO in a partnership with a project that we had there. So I was introduced to service design kind of through design thinking and some of the federal programs that were helping with upskilling. And so I thought that service design would be a good place to lean into as I wanted to, further my studies and experience in design, knowing that the healthcare system, the healthcare sector, and government really would need skilled service designers. So I really intentionally went in the service design direction instead of the UX or product design direction. Today I work at Laerdal. I feel so fortunate to be surrounded by actually like 15 plus service designers. So it's a little bit
Lucky
opposite
you.
to
Yeah.
Shelby. Yeah,
Wow.
we're like, I'm not undercover because we have a really strong team and strong practice. But sometimes when I'm working on a project, we're often working not with each other, right? We're working across the company. And when I'm working on projects, I don't always like start, I think I've heard the one rule of service design is never say that you're a service designer, but I often don't necessarily go into all of the details of service design. And so, a little bit like Shelby, I work right now in between some spaces. There's a project that is called NeoBeat, which is a product. It's already been designed, and it's really, really cool. It's a heart rate meter that provides a rapid heart rate for a newborn. And it was actually developed by our global health entity. And the organization saw a use case for this in high income countries. And so one thing that I'm working on right now is sort of translating the product from the product team to the US market with some colleagues here in the States. And so it's sort of in that in-between space that Shelby was talking about.
So interesting that we can get deeper into that maybe later, but both of you, it sounds like you didn't necessarily start out on a service design trajectory or were looking for a service design position. You sort of found your way into it. And this is one of the questions that I often get is, how do I get an in-house service design position? Well, one of the answers is you start doing service design in the position where you are today and then sort of emerge and grow from there. If you're struggling to find a different or quote unquote a service design open position. Nicole, you already shared something about the projects that you're working on, which is great. One of the things that I'm curious about is how do you define success now that you are in-house? What does success look like for you? Because projects take months, years before they actually materialize. Like, what is success for you? And I'll ask you, Shelby, the question as well, so you can already contemplate on what your answer might be. But Nicole, how would you define success?
Yeah, I think the point that you make about it taking a while is good and important. And I think success looks different depending on where you're at in a given project. Ultimately, of course, it's about well-designed services that are implemented and making an impact, right? Like that's the ultimate goal, I think, for many of us. But it really depends. So I think success could look like just having alignment on a team where people are driving in the same direction and know where we're going and sort of working in lockstep to make something happen. And you can feel that momentum. So that's, one barometer of success. Another is a project actually being implemented. I worked on an early prototype of a service with a former organization, Japigo, and this was a video prototype. I still remember, the roles that we had, and success looks like that service making an impact and being implemented. And so that's actually gone through a trial where there's impacts, and that's success as well. But I think from, having just alignment to actually it being implemented, and the need for the grit and the sort of really working to make something happen and see it through is also important.
So yeah, thanks for sharing. And I get that. Like, we all want to see our ideas, solutions, insights being taken, being implemented. That can take a while. And like you said, alignment is already a different indicator of success. Shelby, I'm really curious. Like, do you also have similar success metrics, or do you have metrics that are maybe more immediate? Like, at the end of the week, it's Friday, and you're sort of reviewing, like, did I achieve what I want to achieve? Are we moving in the right direction? Like, how do you gauge that when you're in-house?
Okay, good question. In-house, in and of itself, is kind of a marathon. It's not a sprint, right? Because when I was out of house, I don't know what you'd call it. When I worked in
consultancy. Yeah.
consultancy, when I worked in a consultancy, I was always dissatisfied because I couldn't live with the thing I made. And I didn't have to. I didn't know if it was successful or not. So like not being able to even see if something was successful was in itself hard, because it's like, well, I don't know. We're just going to tell you to do something and you may or may not do it. When you're in-house, that is not the case. You understand the problems that the organization is having at a deeper level. And service design in particular is kind of sets you up to understand the whole business and all the things that are happening across the business. Whereas like when I had worked in a product design capacity, and I worked in a product design team most recently, it was these like game of inches, can we get a button changed here and a flow changed there? And I was thinking about, the wins and losses and what the strategy team was telling us the organization had to do. And so I was thinking about things on a very different scale. And sometimes when you're in-house, that kind of thinking is not wanted. You have to kind of play, you have to be careful about it. But I tried to take some cues from an early space I learned about service design from, which is the NHS in the UK. They started a practice. It was very small. And one of the things they did was train up all the people around them, to use service design methods when they were creating public policy. And another thing they got into eventually, which I was like, that is the grail right there, is policy design. So policy design meaning like, how do we do this for people, period, across the nation? And to me, that would be sort of this sort of ultimate success, right? In the space I'm in now, they measure everything. Every single thing is measured to the nth degree, but there's no story to it. There's no arc to that narrative. There's just, did this number go up or down? So I'm looking at it as an in-house person as a larger arc. And the way I measure success today, because I'm only 6 months in, is how many people from different functions in the organization did I talk to? Like, how many relationships have I built outside of my tiny little world? Because that's super important. And it is how I got to a place where I was talking to the win-loss team and talking to the strategy team in my last role and thinking about how the sales process went and that kind of thing. But where I am now, it's more welcome. Like being able to knowing those things and learning about that stuff and being able to speak about it in an educated way is much more valuable. That's what I would say. Like, and alignment is one thing, but the thing about physicians is that they're very, very smart people. And they know that they are very smart people. So when you arrive with some kind of recommendation of change, you got to have your ducks in a row. So that's another thing. Like if I can get the physicians on board with something I'm trying to do, then we're going to be okay. the last thing I would say is healthcare in the United States is a very protocol driven system. First this, then that, then this, then that. And it's very, very linear. If you see this, you do this. If you see this, you do this. And that's it. Like that's the way, that is what drives all of the decision making. And so that's super linear. And I am not a linear human. Like I'm kind of like making connections and pulling things together. So success to me is being able to successfully pull that picture together and help the people I'm working with see things in a slightly different way. Right? Because to them, we have a camera, we can make a virtual appointment, we're done. Like it's done. But what they're not, like there's a lot of nuance to whether or not a patient wants to engage in that way. And so if I can get people successfully thinking about things like that from a technology standpoint, I'm making some progress.
Are you keeping track of that in any way? Like, do you have a spreadsheet where you, your own personal CRM system where you track who you have talked to? Or is this just
really.
a gut feeling? Yeah.
Not really, but when it's like the Grinch's heart that it gets 3 sizes bigger that day, right? It's more like, okay, I've talked to the clinicians and I need to talk to the operational folks, and now I need to talk to the access center customer service folks. And when I can understand and converse about their worlds and how it all comes together and fits together, to me that's success. I don't think that is how the organization sees my success. Right? I think they're going to measure it through, again, did more patients use it or not? But for me, when you're first starting out in a role, that's how you measure it, because doing that relationship building will get you the other thing.
Yeah, it's the leading and lagging indicators. Like if more people start to use your service, that's a lagging indicator, but probably the more people you've been able to touch and sort of learn from and connect stories, that could be a leading indicator that things are moving in the right direction. I'm going to make note of your suggestion for the next month to also ask about how do you think the organization measures if you're successful, because I think there might be some differences there. Cool. So thank you for sharing a little bit about your stories and giving us an insight into, I'm stumbling over my words today, about where you are. It's Monday when we're recording this. So maybe that's it. I think this is a nice segue into the topics that you try to address at the dinner table in the circle. So for a little bit of context, the Circle is a community of in-house service design leaders and those who aspire to be really focused on in-house. We've been running this community for close to 4 years now. The topics that we explore in the community are really community-driven. They are brought forward by our members. Every quarter we have a new season, and in 2025, the first quarter was all about career and life. We try to explore topics that you usually don't read about in quote-unquote the traditional service design books, but they do have a huge impact on whether or not you are impactful, successful. And talking about careers and life in general as a service design professional, as any professional, is probably really important. So in March, you both had the opportunity to bring a topic forward. We have multiple groups, so that's why we have you both here. I would really like to hear from both of you, like, why did you choose the topic that you eventually shared with the group? What do we explore and sort of get the key insight for everybody else who wasn't part of those conversations, because the Circle is a small and intimate group exclusive to in-house. But let's see if we can create a membrane with a wider service design community and give a little bit back. So maybe I'll start with you, Cole. What was the topic that you put on the menu, brought forward on the table for your group?
Thanks, Mark. Well, really relevant to this conversation. The topic was all about storytelling, service design stories, and some of the best practices of storytelling, we started with a just open forum of, hey, what are some of your favorite stories that you've heard, both in service design but just in life, to sort of situate all ourselves in favorite stories, and then went into some of the best practices related to storytelling and some resources. So things like keeping it short and sweet, how you can say, if you say less, people can hear more. And then also things like keeping it authentic, not telling lies or being deceitful, and really coming back to sort of truths. And then we went through a exercise where we actually practiced storytelling through a prompt exercise where people were prompted with different prompts, and then also had a chance to refine their stories and practice. And at the end, some people shared some of their stories. So it was really a great a great time, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, sharing stories, that's what we're doing here as well. Let's see if we can
Yeah.
implement some of the lessons learned. Out of all the topics that you could have explored with your group, why this? Why this one?
Well, I think that we can all practice. There's always a need for stories in service design, and it helps make our practice more impactful. And we at the circle have a safe space to lean on each other and to really sort of lean in and learn more from each other. And so I thought that it could be a great part of the career and life season, because stories are all about our careers and lives, and vice versa. And so it just seemed like it could really resonate, and I think it did.
We'll get into what the key insights were for you. And I think it really neatly links to what Shelby just shared previously, like the connections with the people around you. Being a good communicator, a skilled communicator, is like I would say a prerequisite for doing effective service design work, and stories have proven to be a very effective way to communicate. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Shelby, in your session, we didn't go into storytelling, or we always share stories, but it wasn't specifically on storytelling. What was your session about, and can you sort of set the stage?
Yeah. So it was about how do you respond essentially when change chooses you? Any kind of change, right? Because I did notice when we were having other conversations, people would do this thing where they were like, well, there's one time, and then they would give you the backstory and the context and then move forward with the professional version of it. And I was like, wow, people have some interesting reasons they have gone the ways they have. And I think design itself is in a real change time. So I wanted to hear, like, service design we're kind of alone a lot, and we're hired by people who understand to some degree the value of the capability and want to bring it in-house. But sometimes it's a tenuous place, and we don't usually have the what I will call protection, but it's not really protection, of working in a larger design organization. Sometimes we're in the sales organization, sometimes we're in HR, and all of those things change a lot and often. And the other question, the companion question, was, how do you hold on to your center? How do you hold on to who you are when that happens? How do you make decisions about what you're going to do when those things take place? So that was the topic.
Yeah, when you're in the business of service design, you're always working with change. Change is sort of one of the deliverables, which means that you're always going to face resistance. That's part of change. You're fighting against the status quo. Shelby, also the question that I asked Cole, like, out of all the topics that you could have explored with the group, what made you go with this one?
Good question. So I'm also hosting a conversation group about career transitions. And so I've just been watching so many people go through all of these changes and all of this like turmoil, essentially. And I was interested in, people who were from other countries and other parts of the world and other walks of life, and how I just wanted to hear from them. Like, how did they do it? How did they manage it? And how did they keep who they were in the process? Like, if I were just sitting down and having a cup of coffee with some of the folks in the circle, that's what I would want to know. That's where I would
Mm.
start. I'm not a very good small talker.
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic because we try to, well, design. One of the key elements of design is that it's very intentional. We try to sort of orchestrate, architect things to happen, and sometimes things happen to us regardless whether or not we have designed it in a way. And like you say, finding your center, staying true to yourself, that can be quite challenging. So let's get back here to some of the key insights in a second. Nicole, let's go back to you, sort of ping-ponging here. Session about storytelling, fitting it into careers. How did it go? Like, what were some of the key moments, key takeaways for you?
Yeah, and I think some of the key moments, I'll start as like from a facilitator standpoint, was building time to really like think and practice, and to be sure to have prompts ready. And if you have a blank piece of paper, we all know this in like co-design, like if you have a blank piece of paper, it's not going to work. But just sort of from a facilitator standpoint, seating the board, giving people time and space to reflect, worked out really well and was really important. As far as nuggets, there was one that you actually mentioned at the very beginning, which came from a previous service design show episode about never start your stories with, well, I have a story about this. Always situate it in time and place, right? So there I was last week hosting the service design circle, and I was and so you sort of set the stage in that way. And that's a small tip, but I think can go a long way. And then some of the takeaways about just storytelling in general: there's always conflict and there's always a challenge. And that's otherwise you don't really have a story. And there's always emotion. That's a part of it. Every story that was shared brought something to life. There's feelings that were involved, and people, wove those into their stories. So those are some takeaways for me.
Yeah, it was too bad, and we cannot share the mirror board publicly, but you had prepared some really good prompts and examples to sort of fill in the blanks, exercises that make it so much easier to get started. And like you say, once you get going and have been through the motion a few times, it becomes hopefully a second nature. But it's there are so many helpful frameworks out there. It doesn't have to be complicated, and especially when you're practicing with a group, it's very inspiring to hear stories from others. I know there's at least one member who shared their story publicly on LinkedIn. So for everybody who's interested, if you do a little bit of searching, and we may add the link in the show notes, you can actually find sort of the structure of the story that we used. And there was a really interesting story that started with, "Oh shit," and then it moved on. It was really
Exactly.
it was a really good story. Shelby, we had a sort of more intimate conversation with a smaller group in your house. What were some of your sort of key moments from that session?
So I really thought that layoffs were going to come up a lot, but I was talking with people who are from places and spaces where that doesn't happen as much. Or if it does happen, you're really prepared and you have a long time. So that was really, that kind of turned it a little bit on its head. And the most interesting thing I noticed was, people talked about decisions outside of their control, like new leadership or reorgs in their organization, that like showed them maybe this wasn't the right place anymore. And there was a lot of, like they hired this person and this person, then I got moved over here, and it was not something I decided or had input into. So I had to just sort of deal with it, and it wasn't great. And here's what I did in response. And what a lot of people talked about was this sort of incremental, first there's the if you want to talk about it from a storytelling standpoint, there's the recognition that the situation has changed. And what am I going to then do about it? And a lot of people talked about, I need to find something outside of this job that is interesting and that is learning or expansive or a new hobby, even, to kind of get me out of my own head, right? So you're kind of in your own head going, oh, this job is terrible. And you need to kind of break out of it a little bit. And one person told a great story about how that was how they found service design. They were like, in this space, they're in this headspace, and they're like, well, I'm just going to incrementally take on new things and learn something new. That because learning motivates me. It helps me grow. I really love it. And that led them slowly, because game of inches that life is, to move into a different role that was more service design oriented, and they were much happier. But it was this, like, it's not this big dramatic moment, right? And in a story where you throw things and you get on YouTube and you resign and you do things on Instagram. It's more like, okay, what am I going to do about this? And some folks talked a little bit about, like, kind of like, well, maybe I can make it work. Maybe I can make this happen. Maybe I can do this. And discovering that wasn't going to work. So that was like another recognition of a need for change. So it was really interesting to hear how people approached it and the similarities and the differences. They dug deep into who they were and what they enjoyed, and then they gradually found their next place.
Interesting. So are you saying that we are the frogs that are being boiled?
I mean, not. Kind of, yeah, because we are a bit, when you are that close to so many facets of an organization, whether it's a business or a nonprofit or anything, when you are that close and you have that level of understanding of what's going on around you, you see signals faster, and if you have been doing it for a while, you know what those signals can portend, right? You have a sense of what it could mean for you. And being a lot of the times a lone practitioner in an organization, like you're on your own as a service designer, or you're in a team of product designers, or maybe a branding team or something like that. Like, you just have the spidey sense tinglies a little sooner than other folks, I think.
I think so too. So Shelby, in the circle, even though our dinner table conversations are really focused on giving you the space to zoom out and reflect and maybe be a little bit, quote unquote, less productive, we still always finish up with trying to share or write down something that you can take into your day-to-day the next day. Do you recall if you wrote something down, and if so, what was it?
I think it was just, I'm not alone. Like, when I'm seeing things, other people, it's not the exact same experience. We're all different people, but there's a universality to, I guess, jobs and careers where I'm not alone when I'm seeing things and I'm like, ooh, I'm not making it up, and other people in totally different environments are having that, dawning recognition as well sometimes, and it is equally difficult sometimes to unwind yourself from the commitment to a bad situation.
Have you made that into a sticky note that's hanging on your screen?
I mean, I have I have 3 things at the bottom of my screen. One says beginner's mind, one says nervous system check, and the other says yes, you can. You underlined, yeah.
Awesome. Nicole, also, like, was there anything that you were able to take from our dinner table conversation and bring back into your day-to-day?
Yeah. And first off, Shelby, I'm going to have to copy those sticky notes down as well because I love those. Such good reminders. And yeah, I think I've shared some of the practical takeaways, but more sort of generally, just the reminder of how powerful stories are and just how important they are to our practice and to our careers, and making it a practice, just trying to jot things down every once in a while so that you have them, for reference and can shape them. And then I think one piece that came out was about how one story could have many meanings and many different takeaways depending on the objective. And so just sort of keeping your little pot of stories ready and knowing what your objective is and tweaking those stories to meet that objective.
I can relate to that, and that is also inspired by the Service Design Show episode that you already referenced by with Gabrielle Nolan, who literally has a spreadsheet with her stories. I started to do the same thing. I use a different app, but I have a template for whenever
Nice.
I have a spark for a story. Like the template opens and it becomes a fill in the blank exercise. Like, okay, where was it? Like, what could be the angle for this story? Is it about confidence? Is it about trust? Is it about, I don't know, like having a template in your system that you can easily access is definitely super helpful, and I'm using that, not daily yet, but yeah, that was really good. um cool, thanks. Really interesting dinner table conversations as always. We're moving into a new season next month, so the conversations will be on different topics, new season. But this was career and life. I want to pivot into talking about in-house service design, sort of pulling back the curtains and showing the messy side, the real side, the honest side about what it is to be on the inside. One of the things that I would like to get your take on, and let's start with you, Shelby, is maybe um, what do you feel are or is a common misconception about doing service design on the inside? And it would be great if you have a story around that. There we go, stories again.
Yeah, I was an English major, so the storytelling stuff, I'm like right here, hits me right here, you know. Um, so story about that. I would actually say the weirdest story is about deliverables. Because service design like I don't work in Figma that much anymore. I don't work with Mural that much anymore. Like I have moved out of the world of design tools and into this a world of spreadsheets and decks and everything is in a deck. I put a prototype in a deck a couple of weeks ago. Oh my god, it was so horrifying. Like as a designer, like I was like, ugh. But as a person who needed to communicate, I was like, nope, this is a common shared tool that everybody is going to be able to contribute to. We're going to be able to get through this by doing this. So I would say the biggest surprise as an in-house designer is how little you do these like designy things. Like a lot of your time is really spent coalition building, telling the right story at the right time to get the right, the decision made. I have introduced new workshops and things like that to folks, and they are kind of like all about getting them into a mindset where they can just say what they're thinking, because these folks are super cautious, and they're like, well, I'm not going to say anything if it's not right, and I'm trying to get an ideation session going, so it's like quantity not qualities, but they're always like, well, I don't want to say the wrong thing and I don't want to, so those are the kinds of things that will trip you up as a service designer when you are not operating in a design environment, right? So my last service design role, I had a team of service designers inside of a product experience team, inside of a product team, in only a software company, right? So I had all these like layers of, you could say protection, or you could say something blocking me from building those other relationships, right? And now I have none of that. So now I'm finding my way in this new world and trying to think about what is the deliverable that I need to create that's going to get me to the next step. And do I share that deliverable or do I keep it to myself?
Mm.
That's another piece. Like in design, we're always like sharing and showing, and here's my deliverable, I made a thing. And in service design, it's more, you got to be way more strategic about what you share and how you share it and when you share it.
So could you give an example of what is a deliverable that is very useful nowadays to you that you didn't think about maybe 5 or 10 years ago as a design professional?
I know it's going to sound weird, but journey maps.
Interesting.
Like,
Yeah.
because I see their immediate utility, but other folks, it's too big. You're thinking too big. We're focused on this right here. You're thinking too big. Now, I would say they are the organizing principle for every project I've worked on. So every doctor's appointment has, like 6 or 7 different things that happen inside of it. And you can line up every single requirement you have and every single conversation you have in a journey map, which is in Excel. because I don't have a journey mapping tool, so I'm doing it in Excel. But I tend to keep the functional requirements away from folks because I write them, and I write them in a very specific way, and people don't, it doesn't click for them when it's just a list of stuff. If it's in a journey map and it's showing up like this, they get it. So I honestly, the journey map, and maybe personas. Personas are
Hmm.
very difficult to do well and use well. So
We actually had an episode, I think the previous one, where persona it became persona non gratas. That's interesting. Um, and the journey maps, yeah, I have a video of, I think, a 1 hour long tutorial video on how to do journey mapping inside Google Sheets and Excel from, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. I don't know. I wouldn't recommend it maybe these days, but if that's the tool that works for you, like run with it. And this is another spoiler, but we'll be doing a special series around journey management
yeah,
in the coming weeks.
yeah,
Um, thanks for sharing,
yeah.
Shelby.
That wasn't a great story. It's kind of all over the place, but yeah, that's yeah.
All over the place. Sorry, works for me. Nicole, I have a slightly different question for you. So, doing in-house service design comes with a lot of great things, but also with a lot of challenges and more interesting, surprising things. What would you say is truth about in-house service design that you learned the hard way, and like what was the situation?
I've been thinking about misconceptions, so I have to like get my brain.
Well, I have to keep you on your toes.
I know. A truth that I learned the hard way. I mean, I think it's some of what we've talked about with stakeholder. I don't even like stakeholder management, but it's really stakeholder relationships and building those relationships. So the truth is the need for that. Learning it the hard way. I mean, I think just, there was a project that I did that, I kind of went in hard with, this is service design. And this is what it is, and this is what a journey map is, and this is what we're all going to be working towards. And did that move the needle? No, it doesn't, right? And so I guess I learned that a little bit of the hard way. But I think just, like building those relationships is so critical, and the act of doing whatever you're doing is critical. So whether it's a journey map, whether it's a co-creative session, the act of doing that is almost more important than what comes out of it sometimes. And so just sort of remembering that it really is all about relationship building, and we're never doing this alone. We're doing service design work with and through other people. So I think that's an important truth.
Is it? Do you feel that people forget that aspect?
I think sometimes, right? I think that people might come out of school thinking it's all about, the maps and the blueprinting and the, sort of those like artifacts, when it's not. It's about, working together. And I think because I did add service design, and I didn't come into the practice as a from a traditional design background, I've had the vantage point that I really am a facilitator and a co-creator, and it's not just me doing this. And so I think that I've had that perspective, but I think maybe for some it can be hard to remember that, and the importance of the working with stakeholders.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Let's keep repeating that message.
Mm-hmm.
Shelby, I want to know, because you have like experience in the consultancy space as well. If you had to sort of pick one thing, what would you say is the biggest difference working in-house versus working at an agency?
Ooh, good question. I've actually tried to bring some of what I did in consultancy into my work now more. And that is this. There's a smooth customer experience you can create as a consultant, that you're trying to create as a consultant, where your clients buy into what you're selling and it makes sense, not just buying for buying's sake, but what they're buying makes sense because you've created an experience that helps them see what they need to do. And you're there to help them along the way, right? So you might be skating at this superficial level, but if you're doing it right, the client is like ready to run through walls with you and fund whatever it is you want to do. And that is a relationship building thing for sure. I have been told that I do not talk like a consultant or like when I was one. You don't talk like a regular consultant. I'm like, I don't really know what that means, but okay. And so I've tried to take this idea that you're creating this experience for the people you work with, especially when your function is so new, where it needs to feel easy to work with you. And that goes straight at the heart of deliverables, right? You can't create something that people can't consume. The people I work with today have this weird habit of like throwing a document up on the screen and trying to write it together. And I'm like, no, that's like torture. Like that just hurts my soul. Ask some questions, get the answers and reflect those back. Like a consultant would never do that. Never just throw a spreadsheet in front of people and say, let's finish our spreadsheet together. Like, no, it's not. So yeah, I would say that's the biggest thing.
Okay, that's the similarity, which I haven't heard before, but I love it. What's the difference?
The difference is when you're internal, like there's this, it's a terrible metaphor, but I'm going to say it anyway, about how the sausage is made, right? So like there's this, you, first of all, more, right? And second, you're involved in the making of the sausage too. So, it's this whole other level and layer of awareness and context that you have, which can hurt you in terms of bringing too much detail to the table, or it can help you in terms of like demonstrating you have that deep understanding while also being able to like tell a good story and keep people moving along with you. And to me, that's a thing that designers have trouble with, right? Because whenever I have had designers on a team with me, I've always said things like, no one cares about the amount of white space. No one cares about your type scales. They want to know this, right? So like I've kind of like, I know you love your details. I know you love your process. I know your deliverables beautiful. The people you're talking to do not care about any of that. And it's like a shock, but it's true.
I love white space as well and details.
I do too. But that's, this is where I do it. And I can't explain it to people who don't understand. So I just don't try.
Yep. Nicole, I have a similar, but sort of slightly different question again for you related to this is if you look at your own skill set and your own qualities, what would you say is the one that you feel is really indispensable for being an effective in-house service design professional and you're not getting away with storytelling?
All right, Mark. And just one, goodness.
If you had to hire somebody, like what would you be looking for? The indispensable skill.
Yeah. Well, I'll sneak this in here. As I mentioned, we do have a number of service designers. We're very lucky at Laerdal to do so. And we're actually working on a competency and subcompetency model and framework for service design practice. And so I think a lot about competencies and subcompetencies, which are different than skills. But I think that it's hard to pick just one, and I would go back to it depends, right, on the use case and the project at hand. But I really think the ability to like do the strategic collaboration and strategic, I'm going to mishmash a couple of things like thinking, to be able to see that like big picture and the details and to collaborate up and down the organization is so critical.
The zooming in, zooming out ability. How do you do this? Are you sort of mindfully practicing this and honing your skill, or is this something that you feel comes natural? You either have it or you don't.
No, I definitely think it's a skill and competency that can be developed. I think a lot of my background has prepared me to do it. I worked, as I mentioned, at the federal government. So, large level. I've worked in clinics. I've worked in sort of implementation of service delivery, and then, in sort of different settings. That's helped me develop an ability to zoom in, zoom out. And so I think just part of my career experience has allowed for that. But I do think one can practice it. I mean, doing ecosystem mapping of sorts, actor mapping, and then like living into those maps and go talk to those people, right? Make a point of that in your practice. I think one thing that I do before I ever talk to a customer or users is to look at the ecosystem and talk to those actors, and to get that holistic picture. And so that's, part of my practice and could be part of anyone's practice.
Yeah, love the example. Doing ecosystem maps and then actually going into the details. That's a really interesting. Talking to your CEO about the strategy for the next 5 years and then breaking it down, like how does it actually impact the product team? Cool, thanks. You managed to pick one. That's good. And didn't get away with it depends either. So, I've got a question. So as we're heading sort of towards the end of our conversation, for both of you. Now, you're on the inside. You're in healthcare space, health tech, industries where things probably are moving even slower than, for instance, being a service design professional at a startup. So it takes a lot of patience. It will take a while before you see the impact of your work, if it even materializes. You're always working against policies, against the status quo. I'm sort of painting a very gloomy, dark image here. In that context, I'm really curious, Shelby, like, what keeps you motivated? Like, what gets you up on Monday and like, why? Like, again, why do you do it? How do you make sure that you don't burn out and without seeing any tangible outcomes?
Very good question. I would say I burned out and didn't know I was burning out before. And I was burning out in the roles where I had the most obvious, immediate, tangible impact, actually. So yeah, like when there was, software changes that were made, it was just the pace of it, the grind of it, and the amount of just nonsense around it, like really, really affected me. And I didn't actually know that was the case until I was done doing it. I was like, oh, maybe I'm burnt out and I don't even know it. So I think what kind of keeps me going is there are a few things. One of them is that, like, recently I was able to find my daughter a physician that she really, really likes. And like the ability to work inside of a system and know how to work within it and do things in it is like very satisfying, especially something as complex as healthcare, which is just, whoa, there's so much to it. It's never ending. The other thing that gets me up in the morning is learning, which I guess, when you're in a super complex space, like being able to learn new things and it is like life, like it's like life-giving, because you're not like every day is not going to feel great. Like it's not. There are some days where I'm just like, well, screwed that up and I'm really, really hard on myself about it, or I feel like I didn't deliver something that was as good as it could have been. There's all this like stuff, this like sort of rotating bunch of things in my head. But I think at the end of the day, like what I'm working toward or trying to help the organization move toward is the thing that I did for my daughter, I would like to be easier for everyone, and maybe technology isn't the way to go. However, it's kind of the only way it's going to go well in the States, because we have shortages of doctors and nurses and all kinds of providers. So like being able to say I had a positive impact on someone being able to get the healthcare they need in a more simple and convenient way is one of those things. But that is a super long game. It's way the heck out there. So learning, helps me feel like I'm incrementally succeeding, I think.
Being in the unknown and getting satisfaction out of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You'd think it would be totally, a lot of designers who have been on my teams and that I've worked with really need the tangible. They must have it to feel success, and I think maybe it's at the point I'm at in my life, or maybe it's how much design has changed in recent years, where I just am like, the human side of this is going to be one of the only things that survives. And part of that is being able to inhabit the level of uncertainty and not knowing stuff that comes with it.
It's even more fun to not. Answers are boring. The questions are more interesting.
Yeah.
And Nicole, what keeps you going?
Yeah, a lot of what Shelby said resonates, and I love the sort of trying to find comfort in discomfort and with ambiguity and really feeling that's okay, which can be really hard. But yeah, what keeps me going is definitely the impact and working towards, improving the world in some small way. I am lucky that the company that I work for is a social enterprise of sorts where we're helping to save lives, and that's our core company's mission. So I do think that is so important for me to come back to just sort of know the impact that I'm making when, you're in the thick of a project and it can feel hard, that it is, for the better. And I think even if someone's not in a space where they're directly sort of making an impact, you can find ways where you are. So I think coming back to that, and then I'll also go back to one of Shelby's sticky notes of nervous system check, right? That gut check and taking care of your needs and finding out what they are, being able to identify them, communicating them, and making sure that you're okay. I love the oxygen mask analogy of, okay, put your own oxygen mask on first before you put on someone else's. And so just making sure that you're okay first.
That's really good advice in general. Speaking about advice, I want to get one last piece of advice out of you both. And that is, Nicole, what would you say to somebody who's considering starting in-house or moving to in-house? Like, what would you say to them?
Do it. And then if you feel like you can't, just start, right? Just start doing the practice and things will follow, is what I would say.
How about you, Shelby? What piece of advice would you give them?
I would say in-house is going to survive. Agencies and consultancies may not. And so the sooner you kind of wrap your head around the idea that design can happen in an organization and it just may not happen in the ways you expect and the ways you think it happens today, it's one of the places that it's going to survive. So I'm not saying like you must go now, but like it's worth thinking about, because there's two ways design's going to go. One of them is you could lean into the super technical side, and the other way is the superhuman side. And when you're in-house, the game is much more human, That's what I would say.
I love superhumans. Let's go. Rooting for Team Superhumans over here. And on that bombshell, I really want to thank you for being the guinea pigs on this reboot of this series. We'll try to do this monthly, get different service design professionals who are doing the hard work of making the services around us better. So thank you both for sharing your experiences. Thank you for being part of the Circle community and sort of bringing your knowledge and practical wisdom in there. It was a pleasure to have you on. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Shelby and Nicole and that you can apply some of their insights to your work. If these stories resonated with you, please leave a comment on this episode. You can do that on YouTube or Spotify. And if this episode fueled your desire to connect with fellow service design professionals for conversations that challenge your thinking and support your journey, we'd love to welcome you into the Circle. In the Circle, you will find a passionate group of smart and generous professionals who meet regularly to share wins, failures, and hard-earned lessons, both to push each other forward and to offer encouragement. To learn more about the Circle community and how you can join, head over to servicedesignshow.com/circle, and you'll also find the link in the show notes of this episode. Thanks again for tuning in to the Service Design Show. I'm Mark Fontijn. Take care and see you soon.